Brendan Sexton is an ex-drug user who helped start a neighborhood treatment center for other drug users a few years ago. The center is called Encounter, and it's located just south of Greenwich Village in New York City. Brendan spent a lot of time thinking about what his own drug use was all about. He's also worked with hundreds of other addicts in the last few years. What you're going to be hearing now are some of Brendan's feelings about the current drug scene. Some people say that marijuana smoking leads people to try more dangerous drugs, but Brendan doesn't feel that pot use automatically leads to harder drugs. He's found from his own experience that if a person hangs around with a crowd that's into drugs, he's likely to take drug use for granted and to forget that some drugs really can be dangerous.
I helped start Encounter about 3.5, 4 years ago. Me and my wife and Jan Stacy and a few friends helped begin the program, and now I'm director of Encounter. We started simply because there were a group of us who had used drugs and didn't anymore, who wanted to do something for the other kids in the neighborhood who were using drugs and getting in trouble.
Do you have an age range?
Yeah, 13 to 25. The age of the people we're seeing has gone down, but the amount of drugs use has gone up simultaneously. It's no insult to young kids. It's just true that a guy 18 or 19 is a little more serious-minded about what he's doing to himself and to his health, and looks at it a little more carefully than a guy 14 or 15 does. So as more and more of the drug users have gotten younger and younger, there's been a great deal more carelessness.
Do you suppose it's because young kids, in a way, don't think that anything can ever really happen to them? I think that's maybe part of growing up, is the realization that something can happen to you.
And sometimes, very often does. Just about everybody who's really gotten seriously messed up with drugs had that attitude that it'll never happen to me. But so many people slide into drugs by imperceptible steps, whereas if you actually ask them to sit down one day and decide, I will now go into drugs and use whatever comes my way and spend my time thinking about, talking about, remembering, looking forward to, getting money for, and using drugs, most of them would say, well, I don't really want to do that. That's too time-consuming and it's too ridiculous. But the decision was never made. They just sort of slid into it. I not only was sure I would never get in trouble behind drugs, but I used to go around preaching to my friends. While I was smoking pot, I was preaching to the ones who were using pills, telling them they were stupid. When I started using pills and a little cough medicine, I was preaching to the dope fiends and speed freaks that were around at that time and telling them they were maniacs. And when I started shooting dope, I still didn't think of myself as a junkie.
Do you remember in your own mind why you went from one thing into the next?
Well, there were a lot of things going on. Among them, boredom with what I was doing, looking for a little bigger kick. Among social pressure, I wanted to be a little bit ahead of the crowd. Also, after a while, after you hang around with people who use a lot of drugs, you stop remembering that it's really quite a big thing. That is, you're smoking a little reefer, and some guy's around taking pills. And a couple of years ago, you would have thought he's probably going to be in trouble, or he is in trouble. But after a while, you get used to it. It's no big thing to you. You don't even think about it. So one day you drop a couple pills, and you really don't think about it much. Drugs do funny things to you. You begin to get so involved with the state of your head that almost nothing else seems to matter, and you start losing friends. You almost certainly lose your relationship with your family. You can even start doing things like losing jobs and getting thrown out of schools, etc., because nothing else is really so important as the state of your head. And what commonly happens is that the fun begins to wear off a little and the consequences begin to pile up. The kind of questions a young guy has to ask himself, or a young girl, is questions like what it means to be hip, for instance, whether or not drugs really are hip, what it means to stand up to a crowd as opposed to going along with a crowd.